Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and what type of property investor are you? You see, speaking to property investors, they all tell me much the same thing. They bought their properties because they're looking for a degree of financial independence. Some are wanting to quit their jobs, others just want to have the choice whether they work or not. Some are trying to save for retirement, while others wanting to leave something for their children, leaving a legacy. Yet, despite the great Australian dream of financial independence, it's still alive and well. The problem is most property investors never achieve the financial independence they strive for. With around 1.8 million property investors in Australia, less than 1% of them own 6 properties or more. And you really can't become financially independent just owning 1 or 2 investment properties. On the other hand, a small group of investors manage to build substantial property portfolios. Now, interestingly, we tend to see a disproportionate number of them as clients of Metropole. Anyway, over the years, I've found that most investors really tend to fall in one of 3 categories, which led me to try and see if one style of investing was more successful than others. So let's have a look at the 3 main types of property investor. As you listen to this, maybe you can try and work out which category you fall in. Firstly, there's the passive investor, who tends to spend little time looking for a property. They're not really interested in all the ins and outs and going along and doing lots of research. They don't spend a lot of time working out about finance and tax laws and compounding and so forth. Rather than conducting any due diligence or consulting industry professionals for advice, they're more likely to go and buy one of the first properties they come across. The second type of investor is the more active investor, who puts in some degree of work in order to find a good investment prospect. They gain an understanding of the principles involved in property and finance and taxation, and many of them tend to seek professional advice with regards to structuring of their portfolio, and they conduct some due diligence in the hope that they're going to increase the likelihood of making a viable investment purchase. And finally, there's the analytical investor. The analytical investor who tends to run around for months, sometimes even years, examining every nook and cranny of our property markets, endlessly comparing values and sales, reading reams of material regarding real estate do's and don'ts, and seeking advice from as many experts as possible before committing to anything. They like to conduct as much due diligence as possible and look for that ultimate investment property. So who fares better? If property investment were like many other things in life, then the effort and energy you sink into property investing, the more you put in, the greater your rewards are likely to be. In other words, passive investors would enjoy smaller gains than the active investor, while the analytical investor would come out on top as they're willing to do their hard yards. Yet, with regard to property investment, this is only partially true. Many passive investors purchase their investment properties the way they would buy their home. They buy emotionally. They tend to buy near where they live, or near where they work, or close to where they want to retire or holiday. These are all emotional reasons. Now, some live to regret their investment decisions and have difficulty holding on to their investments. In fact, many beginning investors sell up after a few years. Statistics show that around 50% of those who buy an investment property sell up in the first 5 years. And those that can hold on usually do well, but more of that in a moment. The active investor usually does well if he seeks advice from a team of consultants. What about the analytical investor? Let me share a story with you. I remember last year I attended a property expo where I ran into Leonard. He was a successful IT engineer. He'd been subscribing to my newsletter for over 5 years. And when I first saw him, maybe about 3 years before that, he said to me he told me he was going to invest in property. So when I caught up with him, I asked him, how's his investments going? And he explained he still hadn't made a move. Instead, he continued to research the market. Now, Leonard's very intelligent and has a tendency to overanalyze things. Hence, he's still waiting for the perfect property, the perfect time, the perfect set of circumstances in which to buy. What he doesn't realise is this is never going to happen. If he'd invested in a good suburb in his hometown of Melbourne 3 or 4 years ago, his property would be significantly more valuable today, possibly up to 50% in value. If he'd chosen the right property in the right suburb, he'd have done very well. He most likely would have done even better if he'd invested in a good property in the Sydney property market. Instead, he told me that he's got about $500,000 sitting in the bank waiting for the right opportunity to come along. On the other hand, let's look at an example of a passive investor. Let's call him Mark, who was so naive that he bought the first property he could get his hands on, maybe 20 years or so ago, and he would have probably paid around $75,000. At that time, his friends and family told Mark he was crazy. He paid way too much for the house. It was a bad time to buy. It was a foolish thing to do. Although he may not have done all his homework. Mark still bought in a popular inner suburban area of Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and guess what? The value of that home would now be in the order of $600,000, and if he was half smart, Mark would have borrowed against this increasing equity to allow him to buy more investment properties. The lesson from all this is it really doesn't matter too much if you're a passive investor, an active investor, or an analytical investor. As long as you're taking action in the market, it doesn't really matter if you're not running around examining every aspect of the property market. Or maybe you are, and that's not bad. In fact, you shouldn't just buy any property, but as long as you don't get so absorbed in the process of learning about property that you forget to actually use that knowledge and buy something. In other words, if you've been thinking about investing in property, now may be the right time for you to act. Despite the many mixed messages out there, there are still some great opportunities in selected capital city property markets around Australia. But as I said, you can't just buy any property like Mark did. Of course, you should still put some thought into what to buy. You can either buy the right property or you can buy well. Often investors who take far too long researching the market never make a move looking to buy well. They want to pay under market value for their investments, and this becomes their sole focus. Buying right, on the other hand, is not really influenced by price and value, rather they focus on the quality of the property that they end up with. Now, here you need to do a little bit of research to understand underlying markets, the general opportunities there, what's going to give you capital growth. I don't find this hard. I can always beat the averages. To ensure I buy a property that's going to outperform the averages, I use my 5-stranded strategic approach. Number one, I'd buy a property that would appeal to a wide range of owner-occupiers. Not that I'm planning to sell, but because owner-occupiers are going to buy similar properties, pushing up value of those properties, the ones I've got. This will be particularly important in the next year when the percentage of investors in the market starts to diminish. I'd buy a property below its intrinsic value. That's why I avoid new and off-the-plan properties which come at a premium price. I'd buy a property in an area that's got a long, strong history of capital growth, but it's going to continue to outperform the averages because of the demographics in the area. This is going to be an area where more owner-occupiers are going to want to live because of the lifestyle choices, and one where locals will be prepared to and afford to be able to pay a premium price to live there because they've got higher disposable incomes. In general, there'll be now capital cities in the inner and middle ring suburbs. The fourth thing is I look for a property with a twist, something unique, something special, something different, something scarce about the property. And finally, I buy a property to which I can manufacture capital growth through refurbishment, renovations, or even redevelopment. That way, rather than waiting for the market to deliver me the capital growth, I'm going to do the heavy lifting. Following my 5-stranded strategic approach, I minimise my risks and I maximise my upside. Each strand represents a way of making money from property, and by combining all 5, that's a powerful way of putting the odds in my favour. If one strand lets me down, I've got 2 or 3 others supporting my property's performance. And I definitely don't look for the next hotspot. I'm an investor. I'm not a speculator. But I do look for suburbs going through gentrification. They're ones where improving values occurring because young people and developers are moving in, replacing old houses with refurbished homes or nice new small developments. And I also look for suburbs going to benefit from the ripple effect as the strong growth in neighbouring suburbs trickles through. So what sort of investor are you? What are you going to do to take advantage of our property markets? Why not have a chat with the independent, unbiased team at Metropole? Have a chat with one of our property strategists if you're planning to get into the property market, or if you're already in and you want some independent advice about how your property portfolio's performance is working. Give us a call, contact us at metropole.com.au, and we look forward to being part of your wealth creation journey.